As you all are aware of the fact that life is a unique entity of our planet Earth, scientists sought traces of life outside Earth, for which they searched for the presence of water. Hence, water may be known as the liquid of life, medium of life, or symbol of life. Life originated in water. Hence, we can say, no water, no life. Water is vital not only for the origin, but also for the growth and development of all types of organisms, including our green friends, the plants. But have you ever wondered from where plants get water? Yes, soil is the main source of water for land plants. In plants, there are different mechanisms of absorption and transport of water, and this is what we are going to study today.
Hello students, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹੀ ਹੋ ਕਿ ਪਾਣੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਲਿਵਿੰਗ ਆਰਗੇਨਿਜ਼ਮਸ ਲਈ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਪਾਣੀ ਦੀ ਤਲਾਸ਼ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਧਰ-ਉੱਧਰ ਘੁੰਮ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਪਰ ਪੌਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਘੁੰਮ ਸਕਦੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਧਰਤੀ ਵਿਚਲੇ ਪਾਣੀ ਨੂੰ ਐਬਜ਼ੌਰਬ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਕੇਵਲ ਇੱਕ ਹੀ ਜ਼ਰੀਆ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਰੂਟ ਸਿਸਟਮ। ਪੌਦੇ ਦੇ ਪੂਰੇ ਲਾਈਫ ਸਾਈਕਲ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਜ਼ਮੀਨ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਵੱਡੀ ਮਾਤਰਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਾਣੀ ਐਬਜ਼ੌਰਬ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਪੌਦੇ ਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਭਾਗਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਭੇਜਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਪਲਾਂਟ ਬਾਡੀ ਲਈ ਪਾਣੀ ਮੋਸਟ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਕਨਸਟੀਟੂਐਂਟ ਹੈ। Most herbaceous plants are made up of 85 to 90% water, and even woody parts of plants consist of as much as 50% water. At the same time, plants growing in soil are constantly losing large quantities of water by transpiration. Without the constant supply of water, plants cannot carry out any of its physiological activities such as photosynthesis, respiration, and growth. Obviously, an understanding of the manner in which plants get water is really very important, and that is what we are going to study today. Students, ਕੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਦੇ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਪਾਣੀ ਟਾਲ ਟਰੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਟੌਪ ਤੱਕ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਪਹੁੰਚਦਾ ਹੈ? ਕੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹੋ ਪਲਾਂਟਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੈਸਕੂਲਰ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ? ਇਹਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੋ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਟਿਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਨ, ਇੱਕ ਜ਼ਾਈਲਮ ਅਤੇ ਦੂਜਾ ਫਲੋਐਮ. The transport of minerals and nutrients along with water over longer distances through xylem and phloem is called translocation. Translocation in plants occurs at three levels: uptake and release by individual cell, short distance transport from one cell to another, and long distance transport at the level of the whole plant. To understand the transport mechanism of water in plants, we need to have the knowledge of some basic processes involved like diffusion, active transport, etc. So let us first discuss diffusion. Diffusion is the process in which particles move from an area with high concentration to areas where their concentration is low. For diffusion to take place, the medium needs to allow the particle to move. This is called a permeable medium. Diffusion takes place quickly in air. Diffusion is slow in liquids. Some solids like sponge, potato, etc. allow diffusion, whereas some others like iron do not allow particles to diffuse through them. Let us try to understand diffusion in detail.
Diffusion. Diffusion is the spontaneous net movement of particles of different substances from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. For example, diffusing molecules will move randomly between areas of high and low concentration, but because there are more molecules in the high concentration region, molecules will leave the high concentration region and move towards the low concentration region. Therefore, there will be a net movement of molecules from high concentration to low concentration. Some major examples of diffusion in biology are gas exchange in human lungs at the alveoli. In the alveoli, oxygen from the inhaled air enters the blood by diffusion and carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the lungs. Another example is gas exchange for photosynthesis in plants. During photosynthesis, carbon dioxide diffuses into the leaf through stomata and oxygen diffuses out of the leaf as shown here.
So, diffusion एक physical process है जिस which molecules high concentration region to lower concentration region will move करदे ਹਨ. This sounds complicated, but we can easily relate it to our everyday life. A good example of diffusion is the diffusion of molecules in the air from the kitchen when dinner is being prepared. ਜਦੋਂ cooking ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ food molecules ਕੁੱਕਰ ਦੇ ਨੇੜੇ ਵਾਲੇ high concentration region ਤੋਂ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਦਿਸ਼ਾਵਾਂ ਵੱਲ move ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ ਅਤੇ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਹਿੱਸਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਫੈਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹਨ. ਇੱਥੋਂ ਤੱਕ ਕਿ ਗਾਰਡਨ ਤੱਕ ਵੀ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹਨ ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਨਾਲ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਖਾਣਾ ਤਿਆਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ. Let us understand more about this process.
In diffusion, the molecules basically intermingle as they move randomly because of their kinetic energy. Consider two containers of gas, A and B, separated by a partition. The molecules of both the gases are in constant motion and make numerous collisions with the partition. If the partition is removed, the gases will mix because of the random collisions of their molecules. With time, a uniform mixture of A and B molecules will be produced in the container. This is due to diffusion.
Students, let us see another example of diffusion. If we place a drop of red food color in a beaker and allow it to stand for some time, we see that this color gets evenly distributed in the water as the water gets a red tinge. The color moved through the water until it was equally distributed throughout the beaker. Diffusion takes place along a concentration gradient. A concentration gradient exists till the soluble substance is evenly distributed. We witness diffusion when we open a bottle of perfume. Molecules of the scent escape from the container where they are present in very high concentration and spread in all directions. That is, from a region of high concentration in the container towards the region of low concentration, that is, the air in the room. We are able to detect the smell of the perfume even if we are at some distance from the bottle that has been opened. This is all due to this process of diffusion. Diffusion occurs in fluids, that is, gases and liquids. It is more rapid in gases than liquids. Students, now I hope you are clear about the process of diffusion. If not, let us take some general day-to-day examples so that you can understand this process more clearly.
Familiar examples of diffusion include dissolving sugar in tea. Sugar will diffuse in the tea until the entire cup of tea is sweet. When we stir the tea, it means we are speeding up the diffusion. Similarly, you must have observed in your home that the odor of food cooked in the kitchen diffuses throughout the kitchen. If you open the kitchen door, it will spread into the next room.
Students, let us cite some examples of diffusion from our day-to-day life. A smelly gas distributes itself throughout the room by diffusion. A sugar cube placed in a glass of water without stirring will diffuse evenly. After a couple of hours, the first sip of water tastes as sweet as the last one, meaning the sugar molecules have distributed throughout the water by diffusion. Diffusion is said to be passive process as no energy is required. The natural kinetic energy of the particles supplies the energy. In case of plants, diffusion is a very important process because plants transfer food particles from phloem and water particles from xylem through the process of diffusion. They take up carbon dioxide and release oxygen through diffusion. Photosynthesis also includes diffusion in a number of steps. Moreover, roots absorb water and mineral salts from the soil, which is transferred from the roots to leaves through the process of diffusion. All this shows that diffusion is the most important process for both plants and animals. A natural question now is, how are plants benefited by diffusion? The answer is that diffusion helps the supply of particles uniformly throughout a medium in the plant body. You must be keen to know more about the importance of diffusion. Let us list them. Importance of diffusion. Exchange of gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen from environment and their movement through intercellular spaces takes place through diffusion. In plants, exchange of gases during photosynthesis, respiration and transpiration takes place through diffusion. Water and minerals are absorbed by root hairs by diffusion. Transport of some molecules across a cell membrane is helped by proteins. This special type of diffusion with the help of special proteins is called facilitated diffusion. Like diffusion, in facilitated diffusion also, movement of solute molecules occurs here from higher concentration to lower concentration, but with the help of carrier proteins and without any energy expenditure. In our body, glucose enters into the cells by this process with the help of glucose transporters. Let us check out this process.
Facilitated diffusion is one of the means by which substances are passively transported across biological membranes. It involves the transport of ions as well as other solutes such as sugars and amino acids. In facilitated diffusion, special proteins help substances to move across membranes without expenditure of energy in the form of ATP molecules. Facilitated diffusion cannot cause net transport of molecules from a low concentration to a high concentration, as diffusion against a potential gradient would require input of energy. There are a few proteins called porins. Their function is to form huge pores in the outer membranes of plastids, mitochondria, etc. There are special porins to produce channels for water molecules. Can you try to give a name to such water porins? Hope we all agree call them as aquaporins. Our scientists were curious to observe the direction of movement of these diffusing molecules across the membrane. They were able to observe two types of molecules crossing together in the same direction and named the process as passive Simpot. They also studied some carrier proteins transporting two types of molecules together in opposite directions and named the process as passive Antipot. They observed a third type. Here, molecules were moving across the membrane independent of other molecules. Such lonely molecular movement was given the name Unipot.
Facilitated diffusion provides the cell with a ready means of preventing the buildup of unwanted molecules within the cell or of taking up from the external medium molecules that may be present there in high concentration. It has three essential characteristics. It is specific, with only certain molecules or ions transported by a given carrier. It is positive, the direction of net movement being determined by the relative concentrations of the transported substance inside and outside the cell. It may become saturated if all of the protein carriers are in use. बच्चों, आओ हम transport of solute molecules in plants that requires energy ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਿਆ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ ਕਿ ਜੇਕਰ ਨਦੀ ਦਾ ਪਾਣੀ ਹਾਇਰ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੋਂ ਲੋਅਰ ਲੈਵਲ ਵੱਲ ਫਲੋ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ એનર્ਜੀ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿਪਰੀਤ ਜੇਕਰ ਪਾਣੀ ਨੂੰ ਉੱਚੇ ਟੈਂਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਪਾਣੀ ਪੰਪ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ એનર્ਜੀ ਖਰਚ ਹੋਵੇਗੀ। Yes, there is also transport of molecules across a membrane in a direction of increasing concentration. Of course, this is opposite to the process of diffusion and an active process for which energy is required. This is active transport.
Active transport is said to take place when a cell uses energy to transport substances. So, active absorption is an energy-demanding transfer of substances across a cell membrane via membrane proteins against a concentration gradient, that is, from lower concentration to higher concentration. So, we can say that absorption of water occurs with the help of energy in the form of ATP, which is released due to metabolic activities of root cells such as respiration. Absorption takes place against concentration gradient even when the concentration of cell sap is lower than that of soil water.
Now, let us try to understand with an example. The absorption of ions at the epidermal surface of roots and their transport inside the plants follow an active transport. Do you know where the energy required for active transport comes from? The energy is derived from adenosine triphosphate molecules, that is ATP molecules, which are known as the power currencies of the cell. So till now we have discussed three main processes: diffusion, facilitated diffusion and active transport. Before concluding this topic, let us do a small comparison of these three processes.
Comparison between diffusion, facilitated transport and active transport. In simple diffusion, movement of substances do not require any special membrane proteins, whereas in facilitated transport and active transport, special membrane proteins are required for movement of substances across membrane. Facilitated transport and active transport processes are highly selective in nature, whereas simple diffusion is not selective in nature. Active transport process is basically an uphill transport process, means this process can transport substances from a low concentration to a high concentration, whereas in facilitated transport and simple diffusion, the net movement of particles of different substances is from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Active transport is an energy-demanding transfer of substances across a cell membrane, which requires ATP energy, whereas ATP energy is not required in facilitated transport and simple diffusion for the net movement of particles.
So these are the basic differences between the diffusion, facilitated diffusion and active transport. And with this we conclude our today's lesson. Let us summarize all what we have learned so far. Diffusion is the spontaneous net movement of particles of different substances from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Let us take some general day-to-day examples so that you can understand this process more clearly.
Familiar examples of diffusion include dissolving sugar in tea. Sugar will diffuse in the tea until the entire cup of tea is sweet. When we stir the tea, it means we are speeding up the diffusion. Similarly, you must have observed in your home that the odor of food cooked in the kitchen diffuses throughout the kitchen. If you open the kitchen door, it will spread into the next room.
Diffusion occurs in fluids, that is, gases and liquids. It is more rapid in gases than liquids. Biology ਵਿੱਚ diffusion ਦਾ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ common example है gas exchange in human lungs at the level of alveoli. In facilitated diffusion, special proteins help in movement of substances across membranes without expenditure of energy. Facilitated diffusion cannot cause net transport of molecules from a low concentration to a high concentration, as this would require input of energy. Active absorption is an energy-demanding transfer of water across a cell membrane against its concentration gradient, that is, from lower concentration to higher concentration. In simple diffusion, movement of substances do not require any special membrane proteins, whereas in facilitated transport and active transport, special membrane proteins are required for movement of substances across membrane. ਬੱਚਿਓ ਅੱਜ ਲਈ ਇੰਨਾ ਹੀ। ਆਓ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਟੈਸਟ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਹਾਸਲ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਗਿਆਨ ਨੂੰ ਪਰਖੀਏ। ਪਹਿਲਾ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਹੈ Define translocation. The answer is the transport of minerals and nutrients along with water over long distances through xylem and phloem is called translocation. Next question. Give one example of diffusion. Answer. Example of diffusion is gas exchange during photosynthesis in plants. During photosynthesis, carbon dioxide enters the leaf and oxygen leaves the leaf through stomata by the process of diffusion. My next question is, what is the importance of process of diffusion? Answer. Diffusion is an important process because exchange of gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen from environment and their movement through intercellular spaces takes place through diffusion. In plants, exchange of gases during photosynthesis, respiration and transpiration takes place through diffusion. Water and minerals are absorbed by root hairs by diffusion. The next question is, what are porins? Answer. There are few proteins called porins. Their function is to form huge pores in the outer membranes of plastids, mitochondria, etc. There are special porins to produce channels for water molecules. These are known as aquaporins. My next question is, what is passive Simpot movement of molecules? Answer. When two types of molecules move in the same direction across the membrane, the movement is known as passive. The next question is, what is Uniport movement of molecules? Answer. In this type, molecules move across the membrane independent of other molecules. Such lonely molecular movement is known as Uniport. प्यारे बच्चों, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਮੀਦ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ different means of transport ਦੇ regarding ਸਾਰੇ concepts ਸਮਝ ਆ ਗਏ ਹੋਣਗੇ. Thanks for your cooperation and attention. Looking forward to the next class. See you then. Thanks.